the agroecosystems concept is an important one for our class because it really talks about the biophysical elements of agricultural ecosystems. And that is to say that, as we will talk about in other lectures and discussion, when we talk about the term agroecology, it brings in not only the biophysical elements, but also the social, political, and economic sort of human constructs, these important elements into the discussion. But let's start out by just talking about the agroecosystem concept, which is, again, primarily the biophysical elements. So when we look at agroecosystems overall, we think about manipulating plants as the fundamental thing that we do. We do this through selection, breeding, transformation. These are sort of the main categories that we use, the main categories of plant modification, if you will. And what we're doing in selection is going out and picking particular plants, usually from nature, from the wild, and we're selecting them because they have bigger fruits, more fruits, the fruit drops, the seed drops easily, etc. Over time, we learned that we could actually do this intentionally by crossing plants and manipulating their reproductive output so that we were crossing, say, a plant that had high seed content or high seed quality and cross that with a plant that had really rigid stalks, say, in the hopes that over time we would improve varieties so that they would have both high seed quality and rigid stalks. And then transformation as newer opportunities to improve plants through genetic modification of those plants, whether that's, say, taking the DNA from a bacterium and injecting it somehow into the genome of a plant, or actually going in with new technologies such as CRISPR, which is a way that we can go in and actually manipulate the genetic code directly. So those are the things that we do as humans to manipulate plants in agroecosystems. And then, of course, we also manipulate the land. And we manipulate the land, and here we use the term land in a broad sense. We choose the crop type, we choose its configuration, not only within fields, but in landscapes. We decide when to plant, when to sow, when to harvest. We make decisions about how to manage and manipulate pests like weeds and diseases. And then, of course, we manage the soil for fertility and stability. And then we also manipulate and manage disturbance regimes like fire regimes or grazing regimes. So these are kind of the two main things that we humans do to manipulate or modify plants and the land in which they grow towards some particular end. When we do those manipulations, we have effects on the ecosystem. We affect these ecosystem processes or dynamics or interactions where we're either affecting the physiology of the plants, or we're affecting the ability of the plants to photosynthesize, we're affecting the soil's ability to hold on to water or lose water, we're affecting predator-prey dynamics and successional pathways, we're affecting abiotic processes like how the rock mineralizes into soil, how nutrients are made available, etc. And so lots of agroecosystem scientists study these interactions for their own sake by trying to understand how our modification of plants and land affect those dynamics, and then how those dynamics then underpin the ability to provide us with what sometimes we call ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are the benefits that we humans derive from nature, that we derive from the world around us. And so typically we talk about things like food security and sovereignty and renewable energy and the ability to have productive soil and stable climates and on and on. So these are the services that we people derive from the ecosystems themselves. And of course, the ability of our agricultural systems and their management to provide us these various ecosystem services then feed back to our social, political, and economic structures, which modify what we choose to do with respect to manipulating plants and land. So that's just a real short overview of the sort of biophysical elements of agroecosystems. Of course, a lot of what we'll talk about in this class brings home the importance, or tries to develop the importance of how these contextual elements in the social, political, and economic spheres influence these things. But of course, we also are very interested just in these biophysical elements and these dynamics in and of themselves. So that's our overview of agroecosystem concepts. I now have some text to leave you with that is kind of just supporting what I just walked through. But here's text that describes what we mean by agroecosystems, what we mean by plant modification, what we mean by land management, ecosystem processes, both abiotic and biotic, and of course these ecosystem services, or the people part of the equation, which is related to our ability to actually provide for our wants and needs.